Hello, hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Lifestyle Series. Today, I have all sorts of new buddies because Jess is headed off to Canada and Phil has got all the things on his plate right now. So I get to hang out with Steven again today. Hi, Steven. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see his face right now. He's very happy.
Yeah, and my shirt too.
Oh my God. His shirt looks like the Patagonia symbol, but instead it says pee pee poo poo.
I never not laugh at that.
Right.
It was a gift from like one of my athletes. What am I going to do? Not wear it?
No, you have to wear it. That was made for you. And then we also have Coach Tyler here joining us today.
Hello.
Hello, hello. So we are, I was just talking to the guys about how I'm sure we're going to come up with a better way to what to call this. I don't know. But basically going over the idea of like seasons in the lifestyle of like fitness and bodybuilding and things like that, and not necessarily related to like athletic endeavors. Like, are you in season for a competition or something like that, but more in the sense of like bulking and cutting, or really even maintenance seasons. I feel like sometimes people get really caught up in like needing to have a name for what phase they're in. And that in itself can cause almost like too much focus or stress and things like that. When I'm sure anybody who's listened to me talk on this for a while knows that I'm a fan of being kind of like even keeled with stuff for the most part. Like, let your body kind of tell us what we need to do with things. So do you guys have any thoughts to kick us off?
Well, like you were saying before we hopped on, it's coming into sweater season, so that means we're probably hearing a lot of oh, well, you know what, it's time to bulk, or I'm done with my cut. So I think it's like a pretty common thing that as coaches that we run into quite a bit. Like as soon as spring starts to come through, you start hearing, okay, well now I want to start cutting because I'm going to have my shirt off. I'm going to be at the beach. I'm going to be at the barbecues. And so I think this is like going to be a pretty good topic today because people think that it's such maybe an easy thing to quickly transition between the two, where I think for a lot of like lifestyle people, there's kind of a lot of context to consider, like when maybe you are going to say, hey, you know what, it is time to cut. What does your life look like at the moment? What is your summer going to look like? Why are you wanting to cut? So are you even in a position to do something along those lines, which I'm sure we're going to cover throughout this whole podcast. So yeah, I think it's going to be a good one, and I'm sure we'll have some pretty good stuff to say.
Well, I'm going to prove you wrong. Just don't go outside. Don't take your shirt off. No need to diet. You're good.
And then you
conversation over, right?
Right.
Never diet. The forever bulk.
I mean, to be fair, like the sun is real. UV exposure, melanoma. I don't know. Like, come on.
Right. I got completely screwed over by sunscreen this week. Let me tell you, everybody, like, watch out. I swear this summer has been my worst experience for sunscreen because I'm like a vampire anyways. When I go outside, I'm always going to burst into flames. And we went on a boat and don't use the spray. It's bullshit. Used the like normal lotion, still got completely sunburnt in the weirdest areas. Like, it didn't go on well. So Steven's onto something. Sometimes the sun is just mean.
I mean, that could be more of an application problem, right?
Don't you tell me user error.
From the Floridian guy. You're closer to the sun. Maybe that's what it is.
That really is like a thing. Let me tell you, being a mile closer to the sun, I was not prepared for. And I feel like I'm being baked all summer long.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, so it's kind of maybe some people are like, what are you guys even talking about? So maybe the best place to start is the idea of like, what does a bulk mean? What is a diet? What is it? The idea that people are talking about and saying maintenance phases now, like it is wild to me. Like, oh yeah, I'm purposely saying that I'm gonna maintain weight. Like, I thought that's just like the goal. Like, I thought that was the normal goal. But I mean, so I obviously have misconceptions about what's going on in terms of the world at times. Like, what do those things define as, and what do they mean? At least maybe for us in this context.
Yeah. So, it's funny that you say that. And I almost wonder if it's like the difference too between men and women when it comes to like the fitness lifestyle and things like that, where I'm very surprised when I talk to a woman who's like, I want to be in a maintenance phase, or I just want to maintain my weight. If they like lead with that and they're like, I'm happy where I'm at, I'm like, oh my God, you are a unicorn, because everybody wants to lose weight. Like they want to get smaller at all times, even if we're at the smallest they've ever been, And so I always find that exciting. But so like maintenance phase, right? Like we're maintaining. I really like to use that opportunity if somebody is in a place where their body is super chill with what we're doing and we're not seeing crazy fluctuations, they're happy with where we're at. I like to play with different like lifestyle variables to really let things relax. And so that's where it's like, let's test the water with untracked meals or untracked days. I have a client right now who's maintaining, and but there was still some food fear there a little bit. And so we incorporated like a very specific untracked dessert that she splits, so it's very much like baby steps depending on the person. But getting something like that in there, and then, trying to get it too, so that we're not maintaining on a lifetime of cardio. That's another thing. I literally, right before we started, was talking to one of my clients, where we're at like 5 days of 40 minutes, and she enjoys cardio. And so that's always tricky too. Cause as somebody who enjoys it myself, I like to keep it in just for fun. But we also don't want to be in a place where our body has to rely on a ton of activity to stay where it's at. So that's where it's nice to play with either dropping down a daily amount or saying like, let's skip a whole day this week and just see what happens and watch things. And so maintenance is a really nice time to just kind of watch how the body reacts to stuff, kind of throw different things at it and be like, can you handle this? And really figure out what we're capable of. And then do you guys, someone want to dive?
Well, I think
most
people kind of get the idea with dieting, right? Like dieting phase. Yes. And then there's obviously the delineation of everybody says the scale's going down. So they just think weight loss versus not necessarily fat loss, which can be different. But I think for me, one of the other big ones to kind of make sure that we're delineating is the idea of bulking. Yeah. Because when I think of bulking, what I think of is, so when I grew up, down the street was the state chair for the Florida Strongman competition stuff, right? And I remember asking him, I was like, oh, well, how do you gain weight? He's like, just drink a gallon of whole milk every day. And now I hear that and I'm like, wait, what? But for them, like if my only goal was to put on weight, regardless of what kind of weight that was, on the inverse of what we just talked about, that might be a great idea. I'm going to put a ton of calories in, unless of course I'm lactose intolerant. And then please God, don't do that. But so like, there's this idea of traditional, like bulking. You can't see me air quoting on the podcast, of you just put on weight, whatever you need to put on. Yeah, sure. Try and get strong on it, but don't necessarily be worried so much about the delineation of what that weight is. Versus for me, like if I'm going to put on weight, I want to put on a specific weight. And that's different for me with where I'm at, because I've been training for a long time. So if I put on a ton of weight very quickly, it's not the weight I want, which is muscle tissue. There's going to be fat tissue along with that, which if that's the goal, great. But it should definitely be a consideration in terms of the idea of cutting and bulking versus maintaining. Because a lot of people think, oh, well, it's that gain, right? Like, oh yeah, I kind of maintain my weight, but I'm working on getting stronger and I'm working on improving my performance and doing those things, which is probably more so what most of us are utilizing in terms of approach, and even for ourselves, like, because we all understand, like, yeah, if we put on a bunch of body fat in this phase, then that's, we either have to live with that. If that's what we want, great. If that's not what we want, then that means we're just going to have to take that back off again later.
Right.
And it may or may not be beneficial for us.
you don't want to have the classic dirty bulk. Everybody wants the lean bulk or the maintaining phase. So yeah, there's all these kinds of words that get thrown out there, and it's trying to sift through like, okay, which one's which? What do they look like? So yeah, there can definitely be a lot to it.
And I think like, hearing the gaintaining thing, right? I would equate that a lot with just going through a reverse diet while also having a very like you're in a planned out program for your strength training, or like you're chasing stuff. So a lot of the times what I like to do in that situation is have people on a program that like we're chasing improving numbers and things. That way they get that automatic feedback, because as much as we can say, all I want to do is gain muscle, we can only control that like so much. And like, we're still going to risk a little bit of body fat for the most part, and to be in like that best scenario, because at no point, no matter how much we're lifting and like anything like that, if we're adding calories, there's the chance that we're going to add a little bit of body fat with it. And so I always try to make sure people understand that, like as much as I don't want to put on weight that later on we're going to have to take off if that's not where we want to be, there's a little bit of risk involved there as we're adding things. But I think as long as we're also watching other numbers go up and our intensity is increasing and we're getting better at that kind of stuff, that's where I think, all of the different metrics that we follow as coaches with like our system that our clients check in through, that gives us a lot of insight where we're not just looking at their weigh-ins throughout the week. We see waist measurement. I have, depending on the client, I have them either do hip, thigh, or I have my guys do chest measurements so we can keep an eye on everything. And then I always want to hear how their workouts are going with stuff and like celebrate those wins with me. If it's you added 2.5 pounds to something, awesome. If you added, 1 rep to your stuff, great. And then that way, because sometimes it'll be like, oh my God, we've added these calories. The scale went up 2 pounds this week. And, I'm freaking out. Everything's gone wrong. And it's like, yeah, but you also lifted like all of this, like all of your stuff you PR'd on, and your waist measurement is down. And so like, then we know things are working out and we don't have to freak out with stuff. But the dirty bulk with stuff is something that I feel like kind of people will get into accidentally. And that's where like, I almost think of stuff like when people come out of a really aggressive diet and then they like throw everything off. And it's really easy to tell yourself. I mean, I know I've done this like after a prep where you have a day where you'll like blow your stuff out of the water and you're like, I'm supposed to be getting my calories up anyways, so it's not that big of a deal. And you're trying to like rationalize it. You're like, this is helping the situation. It's fine. And, it's just really tough. And I remember like my husband, when we were in our early 20s, he tried to bulk when he got out of the Navy. And I got on him so hard because I was like, you can't be that person who's eating McDonald's and like, just for the sake of like gaining weight and like slamming it, So he tried to bulk by blending. He had me blend up chicken, potato, and like broccoli. Cause I was like, you have to eat real person food. And he's like, I can't eat it. I'm so sick of chewing. Just blend it. I made it for him. He went to take 1 sip and I was like, never mind. Let's go get McDonald's.
BT Fletcher did it, bro. Come on.
It was so gross. I couldn't let him.
I think like that maintenance, I mean, we'll just call it a maintenance phase just for the sake of this discussion. Like, I think it is such an important phase though, to get people away from focusing so much on the scale and, where that is, because yeah, you do get it where, someone maybe put on, a 2 pounds all of a sudden and they are freaking out, but then you kind of go back and like, look, we've added 100 grams of carbs, into your diet over the last 3, 4, 5 months. Sure, over that time, maybe the scale will come up like 4 or 5 pounds, but look at what we've been able to do. And then you even look at your body composition. Let's compare these pictures. Like, a lot of times they'll almost still look leaner than they did when they ended the diet. Like they've started to build muscle. The energy in the gym is so much better. They're getting a good pump. They're able to, go out for dinner with family and friends or, those type of things. And so, I think mentally it's such an important phase for so many people, because I think, for our lifestyle clients, so much of them come to us, oh, I want to be X weight, I want to lose body fat, and it's so hyper focused on those things. And not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, especially if we do have an, excess fat to lose, that is going to be healthy, but it is also then trying to, shift that thinking a little bit and not be so hyper focused on that of like, oh, I need to be X weight on the scale or I'm unhappy type of thing. So yeah, just even taking that time to make those mental changes, and not just necessarily the food changes and the body composition, all that, pretty vital to the whole process overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's this weird thing, and maybe it's us. Like maybe I am part of the problem, right? That we see people online, we see people on social media, and like what we may necessarily think of as health might not be health, right? That person who's really lean, perhaps they're not the healthiest person in the world, right? And perhaps they have other considerations than me too. Maybe they do or don't have kids. Maybe they do or don't want to be involved in that process, or, put the time into those things. And so I think sometimes with this idea of cutting, bulking, and the seasons and what we have to do to get there, it's based on like these preconceived notions of, oh yeah, I only am successful if I look like X, Y, or Z. And it doesn't take into consideration your specific situation, your specific life, your priorities. Like the main thing should be the main thing, right? And so, yeah, we've all competed, right? I competed last year, but I didn't talk about it that much because my main thing is like, I like being a coach. I would rather coach than compete myself. So I don't want me competing, making other people feel like that takes away from their coaching experience, or as if I'm not there to coach for them. And my personal relationships, like my relationship with Jillian, there's no way that competing is ever going to be more important than my relationship with Jillian, period. The diet's not more important than that. Now, is my health more important than that? Yeah, my health is more important. It's part of that. But like when it comes to some of these ideas of why do we want to cut bulk? Why do we feel like we need to do that? I do think that it's important for us to like be a little bit introspective there and say, okay, well, why do I feel this way? Health reasons? Absolutely. Yes. I can get behind that. I'm supportive. What's up? Let's go. But let's also take a step back before we decide we have to make this decision to look at our specific situation and say, okay, does dieting make sense for me? Have I already been dieting? Am I cranky? Am I having a hard time upholding my relationships? Yada, yada, yada. Am I in a good spot to do that? Like seasons in life happen. There are seasons when work is busy and stressful and we are to the limit. There ain't nothing left to pour out. There's no bandwidth left. How are we going to add a lot more into that? No, maybe even though, yeah, we feel like we should be in this dieting season, what we need to focus on is maybe maintaining and setting ourselves up for success in the long term. But if we don't take that step back to look at these things, because obviously there's so much being thrown at us all the time. We need to do this. You need to do that. Blah, 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 blah. Like, all right, tell me how I need to live, right? No. Take a step back and decide how you want to live first and foremost and what's important to you. Then we can formulate the plan. Find out where we're at and like what makes sense to do for us as individuals.
Yeah. And that's something I found with most people that, so I don't know if you guys hear this a lot, right? Like I primarily coach lifestyle clients, but I think because the nature of our company and a lot of the stuff that people see is they come to us knowing that we work with competitors. And then I'll get, where people say, I don't want to compete, but I want to look like I could, I want to look like a competitor, but I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And I get where they're coming from with it. Okay. So you want to look fit, you want things to pop, and you want to look like you work out, like you prioritize these things, but maybe you don't want to go through the aggressiveness of things. And they, like you said, they'll see online, they'll be following these people who are going through on season or like in season and off season when it comes to things. And as a competitor, that makes sense. to have the time, they have to back out of it. They have to add food in afterwards. They have to get aggressive and change their focuses throughout the year because of what their schedule and their plans and stuff like that are. But like, if you're not planning on doing that, I generally keep people as far away from any of that thought process as I can. And we are either in a maintenance / reverse diet phase, because really my goal with coaching women is almost always to get them to eat more. I've had like 3 people where I was like, you know what? We don't have to add any more food. Like, I think, and that's when I'll start saying, let's just not track things, because it'll get high enough. But that's 3 out of like hundreds of people that I've been able to get to where there. The rest of the time, it's always, can you eat more and like add more, because there's that room. And even for myself, like no longer being in a phase of life where like I've done it a handful of times. I don't have any interest that I can see coming up in getting that lean and having to be that focused and stuff again. And so for me, it's that like, I don't want my pants to be tight sometimes. I just want them to fit. I just want things to chill, And so for me, that ends up looking like I want to be as strong as I can possibly be. Because I know if I continue focusing there and just focus on athleticism and things like that, normally it lets other stuff fall into play. Now, maybe there's some days where I'm just not as hungry and I don't stress on it, or like there's days I want more, and you can let that kind of thing happen. But I think when it comes to lifestyle clients, I just don't see it as super appropriate to ever be entering into a conversation of, hey, let's bulk. It's more like, if this is a lifestyle and you want to keep it, let's do the things we need to do for this just to become the thing you do, as opposed to, well, this period of months I'll do this, and that period of months I'll do that. Because even if we do that, I had one client I had worked with a little over a year ago. We had worked with each other for about 2 years, and she wanted me to lay out, like, over the course of the next 18 months, exactly what she could mark on the calendar for what we would be doing at each phase. And I kept kind of like pushing it off, because I was like, this makes me really nervous, because I knew with just her personality, if I give her these dates, then on like August 1st, it's going to be like, well, you said, and that she'd want to move it. But it's, no matter how much we know about the body, it still kind of does its own thing, and we kind of have we could try and manipulate it to where we want to be, but we still have to roll with its lead. And sometimes, even if we've put in the time, maybe we're not perfectly ready. Or like Steven said, all of a sudden work is punching you in the face, or this thing happens with your family, and like now you're buying a house or whatever it is, and things get crazy.
Surprise, you're pregnant.
Right. Oh, exactly. And you know what kills me? Because when people will like, I feel like it happens when they get to a place they're really excited with their body. And then it's almost like well, shit, now I'm pregnant. I mean, that's exactly what happened with me after I had Ben. I had just gotten to the like place where I was like, hell yeah, 35's so cool. I look awesome. I feel great. And then boom, got pregnant with Claire. And I was like, oh man.
You know why, right? Because as soon as you start feeling really good about your body and how you look and how you feel, certain things start happening more.
Do you know how many people come up to me with 4 kids and say, you know how this happens, right? And I'm like, oh yeah. No, we clearly have that figured out.
Well, and like I even find too, like with a lot of lifestyle clients that will come, that like, I want to hop into a cut. A lot of times they don't even have the consistency and the habits to go into a cut, and like they're not even quite ready in that sense. And so again, like it is coming to that, like where it's like, hey, you know what, there's still a lot of other things that we need to do before we even get there. Can you even handle just your regular life and maintain? Show me that you can just do that consistently first, because when we do move into a cut, guess what, it is going to just ratchet up another notch. You do have to have another layer of consistency to get to where you want to be. Like if you have 20, 25, 30 pounds to lose, which I would say, most lifestyle clients that I've worked with kind of, that's their ballpark of where they want to be, but you can't even hit your macros consistently for 2 weeks, maintenance. So so you really then have to go into your life and go, okay, where are the areas that I might struggle in when I do enter a cut? Is it meal prep? Is it my job? Is it this? Like, I just talked with a guy yesterday. He doesn't know his work schedule, like up until like the day of every single day. And he's like, I want to cut. I'm like, whoa. Like, there's a lot more that we need. Like, he could work a 24-hour day. He could work an 8-hour day. He just never knows. He could work a week in a row. So it's like, there's things that we need to figure out first before we even look at cutting. Because if we just jump into it, guess what? You're going to get frustrated. I'm going to get frustrated. This is not going to be a great experience for either of us. And we're not going to get to where we want to be. And so I think it is just figuring a lot of those type of things out too.
Wait,
Yeah.
you get frustrated? I mean, what's that like to care about your clients?
Well, of course, I mean frustrated, you know what I mean? Like frustrated in a caring sense.
No, I
Yeah,
mean,
well, go ahead.
if we're invested, right?
Yeah.
Like, I want to see you make progress. That's the only way I win as a coach, is if you win as an athlete and a client. Like, regardless of whether that's getting on stage, losing 5 pounds, squatting an extra 20 pounds, it doesn't matter what the goal is. If you don't win, I don't win. Like, period.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's it.
Big time.
And but I mean, you make a good point, because I think also what we see is not the truth of the matter a lot of the times, right? And we say it all the time. They have that wonderful little iceberg example that everybody loves to post. But the people that you're looking at that are like in the crazy shape stuff too, right? I want to look like I compete but not compete. Those people don't normally lead the same lives as everybody else. They're probably not going out drinking all the time. They're probably, not crazy social individuals that are going out to eat on a regular basis. A lot of them may or may not have children. Not to say that you can't be in great shape and do that stuff with kids, but hey, some of them may have other considerations, right? We may have different considerations. And along with that, they've been doing it for years. So the idea that I'm going to go from, and let's say, what are some of the things I loved as a kid? The Tyson buffalo chicken strips with hot sauce and Parmesan cheese, right? Mac and cheese, tons of cereal, all that kind of, the idea that I'm going to go from that to eating lean proteins, 3 to 4 or 5 times a day, veggies, knowing what those calories even look like, as opposed to just making a plate of nachos because I'm kind of hungry and want to play some Call of Duty or something, right? Like, this is kid Steve, by the way. This is teenager Steve. So if you want proof, I've taken all of it off the internet because I had long colored hair and I don't want anyone to know it. Sorry. Like, how am I going to?
That's not fair.
I know, right? But how do you make that change like overnight, immediately? But I feel like a lot of us have that expectation, and the seasons thing, it really facilitates that. Instead of looking at making what is going to be sustainable long-term change, so they're like, okay, we're going to be able to do this in 10, 20 years and still feel good, look great, perform well, and do all the things we want to do, be healthy. It sets us up for, okay, I might be able to do this for a couple months, and then who knows, right? And so the idea of, because we all know there's seasons in life, but the idea of I have to have a season of dieting, I have to have a season of bulking, it doesn't set us up for the long term. And I feel like what it really does is it promotes that continual dieting.
Yeah.
Because what happens is, all right, I'm going to go into the cut. Now I made these really crazy changes. Sure, maybe I made my weight goal and got into the cut, but now that I'm done with the cut, boom, I'm done. That's it. Like, hey, coach, thanks. I'm going to quit the coaching anymore. I'm going to go right back to my old diet, right back to the things I used to do. Steven's eating all the Tyson chicken strips and tortilla chips and nachos that he can. And guess what? Now the weight's right back, if not more at times, right? And now we're stuck in this yo-yo diet that we know just kind of puts us in this perpetual place of frustration and the sound of the word. I don't know the word, but
No, that's 100% it. And that's why I get nervous with that stuff. I even get nervous with lifestyle clients and things like rest day macros. I stay away from carb cycling for the most part, because I feel like that can even become a crutch a little bit. Like, when you hear people talk about, like, they'll say, well, I went over on Friday, and so Saturday I pulled back a lot, and, to try and make up for it. And I see what they're doing. And I've been there before, where they're looking at the weekly average and wanting to try and make the numbers work. And can you find progress that way? Yeah, you can. Is it ideal? And if you're paying for a coach and getting that kind of information and like providing the feedback, it's something that I try to stay away, even from like training macros and off day macros and the ups and downs, because I think, especially when people do the reactive rest day macros, basically, where it's like, oh, I went over, so now I'm going to pull back. Well, then, what ends up happening 2 days later? They go over again because they're fucking hungry from the 2 days that they chose not to eat for the last time they overate. And so then it goes back up. And then we end up in this really vulnerable cycle of, I have no control over food. If I get around a bag of Tyson chicken strips, I'm going to eat the entire thing. And so I just can't have them in my house. So I ate all of it, got it out of my house. Now I'm not going to eat for like 3 days. I'm going to, be super low carb and everything. And then they get so hungry, they see the tortilla chips and then they go crazy. And we end up in that situation. And so and it came with time from myself, and it came with time with clients and everything, to see that I just really think that staying as like smooth as possible, and it could be a smooth, steady incline with calories, and maybe we're adding them. There can still be punches of refeeds or untracked meals and things like that. But for the most part, I just think the most appropriate action for somebody who just wants this to come off as a lifestyle. This is what I look like. This is what I do. This is how I live, is to set it and forget it and just like roll with it.
Yeah. It's important because the people who look the way most people come to us with that feedback, it's their lifestyle. It's what they do on a regular basis. And not because they're forcing it, but because they probably enjoy lifting weights in the gym. They probably enjoy, for whatever reason, the structure, consistency, possibly control of knowing what you're going to eat and having things just be reasonable. And like, hey, do I know what I'm going to eat tomorrow morning? No, not 100% for sure, but I can tell you with 99.9% assuredness, it's going to be one of two things. It's going to be my normal eggs that I make in the morning, or, if I'm strapped for time, I'll do a shake that I have stuff for. It's just who I am at this point. I'm boring. Like, but we don't want to, because that's a harder conversation to have. It's a harder conversation to have, to say, hey, if this is how we want to look long-term and look like that reasonably year-round-ish, like, instead of working on looking at that right now, I want you to work on looking at what you do in situation X, Y, Z, how we respond to this stuff. Now, how do we change these responses or change these things that are detrimental to that long-term goal into things that are now going to benefit that long-term goal? Because that's a harder conversation to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I'll often have that conversation of like, there's a reason it's called bodybuilding, right? Like, you say you want to look like this, but you don't want to take the time to, build. And I know we've been having that conversation, but it does come down to that, that consistency and the habits and taking the time to fuel your body, give it what it needs to get to where you want it to be. I tell people, I'm like, I wouldn't look like this if I wasn't able to enjoy some beers on the weekend and some pizza. Like, I like eating out. I like having, those types of dinners and having a drink or two. And I wouldn't be able to live this lifestyle if it wasn't for some of that flexibility and look, and it is that full on lifestyle of having your overall structure, which then leads to more flexibility. And I think, we've heard this before where, maybe the flexible dieting word kind of started to get a bad rap, where we wanted to bring it back to structured flexibility, where that flexibility is built into an overall structure. And that's where you really do tend to have, that full on lifestyle of okay, you know what? 80% of the time, I'm, hitting my macros for the most part. I'm training hard, sleeping well. But that 20% over 365 days is maybe that's a week vacation where, you know what? I'm not really going to track. I might go for a couple walks. I'm going to enjoy myself. But because I've had that overall structure, there's very minor fluctuations within the system. Like, I went to Oregon for a week, didn't track, did not work out, played on the beach, hung out, ate, drank, came back up about 5-6 pounds within a week of just being right back on plan. Boom, right back to pre-vacation weight. And I think that just really speaks to having that overall structure in your life, and like you can kind of get away with a little bit more every now and then and really not have these big disturbances or ruining that whole year physique, etc.
And I think a good delineation we have to make here is like, we're all obviously very experienced with this. There is no point in time where like I look at food or look at a drink or whatever I may be choosing to put into my body and don't have some semblance or thought of probably calories, maybe, or even at the minimal amount, this is probably overdoing it. Like, yeah, I'm being an asshole about this right now, right? Like, because it's literally the lights. So if you've been doing it for a week, it's very different than like maybe where Tyler's at. He's built up the ability, the knowledge base, and the habits to where, okay, he's in a different spot. And he's probably going to handle that a little bit better than, okay, cool, I've had a couple weeks under my belt, I've done really good. Now I'm out over the weekend, and instead of maybe Tyler's getting like an extra 400 calories every day from what he normally gets, I'm getting an extra 1,200 calories a day from what I normally get because I've also been trying to diet, or I've also been doing XYZ. Or I'm not familiar with a lot of the stuff I'm partaking in out here, and now the estimations are way off.
Yeah.
Kind of stuff.
I think that's a really good point to make, because I think, yeah, it kind of speaks again back to like having a lot of structure, especially as you begin this, this journey. And the more time, again, you can kind of spend, let's say, in a maintenance phase, and the more you kind of do tend to eat roughly the same foods, the better and better you get at being able to estimate and to guess. And like, there's probably all three of us could probably go through a full week, not really weigh anything out, and probably hit our numbers pretty closely just by eyeballing stuff. Like, I could look at at a bowl, put some cooked rice in, and just where it sits in the bowl, I've got a pretty good idea of how much that is, like roughly cooked. So yeah, I think that's a very, really good point to make, that as you are starting, having a lot more structure is going to be, your best friend. As much as it might be difficult at first, especially if that's just not something that you're used to, the more you can do that, keep it to roughly the same foods that you enjoy, man, that is just going to make the long journey so much easier.
Yeah. And I feel like a big part of it too is, even when Steven brought up like the timeline with things, is whether it's weeks, like even, I was talking to somebody who's like, well, I've been, focusing on lifting heavy and things like that for like 6 months. And I just want to reveal the muscle I've built. And, you don't want to be like a Debbie Downer with it, but it's like, oh, well, because she was upset that like it wasn't reflecting in pictures as much. I'm like, well, 6 months isn't really that long, like in the grand scheme of things, which is why when like women will say, well, I don't want to lift because I'm going to get bulky. And I'm like, man, I've been trying to get bulky for so long. Like,
trying to get too
still
bulky
like
15. Yeah.
Oh, feels.
I'm over here with these long limbs trying to build little muscles on them. And like, I'd love for it to pop up. And like, that's where it really comes down to whatever amount of time you think is long enough to be consistent with something. If you haven't been there before, you probably want to like triple it before it's really nailed in. Right. And then kind of maybe test the waters a little bit with like stuff that Tyler was talking about, and see if you can pull that off. Cause I think that is really helpful. And I like to send people on trips or vacations, especially like my clients who are like, do you want me to bring my food scale? Do you want me to do this or that? And I'm like, nope, I trust you. We've been doing this long enough. I want you to choose similar foods. Like, we can find that on the menu. You can make this happen. But then like the other side of things too, when it comes to social media, there was like there's a couple of influencers out there, right, who started kind of like getting like given a bad name to things like progress pictures, or where you would do a full day of eating and there'd be a picture of like the influencer or something like that. And they'd be like, stop, showing your bowl of oatmeal with like your abs or something. And the thing is, I feel like, so then I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to share those anymore. If like, they're giving, I don't know, like I wasn't sure how to feel about it when people were going off about these, saying it's sending the wrong message. But then it's funny because I'll share some things that are just routine parts of my day, like protein shake. I am shit at protein. I hate it. I'm never going to choose to eat meat over like other stuff. I have to make sure I get my protein in and think about it, or I won't. And so one of my tricks is to grab a pre-made protein shake when I leave to take my kids somewhere, because then I know I'm going to get 30 to 60 grams in the form of protein shakes without thinking about it. I can just suck it down. I'm good to go. And I had 3 different people respond to my stories today where they were like, thank you for sharing this trick. And I'll think, everybody's seen me talk about this. I should stop talking about it. It's boring. But then there'll be somebody who's like, I never thought about that. Or I had someone else comment about like a meal where they were like, you eat that all the time. Don't you get sick of it? And I'm like, no, because it's a meal that's going to taste the same every time I make it. So I can anticipate what it tastes like. I know it's going to give me 40 to 50 grams of protein, a little bit of fiber. It takes me about 90 seconds to throw together and about as much time to get it in my face, and I can move on with my life. And, I think that like the look that a lot of people want and the results they want comes with a lot more boring than they think, which is why the season idea can be very appealing, because it's like, okay, so I only have to add calories in for 3 months, and then I can stop feeling fat at the end of 3 months and I can go into a diet. And then I only have to be super on point for another 3 months. And then we're going to add food in again, and they look at it this way, where it's like this different version of, well, I only have to do this for this long and stuff. And it really is just like, I'm a very boring person when it comes to my food choices. I eat almost all the same things. My husband almost never trusts me when I tell him a food is good, because he's like, you've been eating the same boring shit for so long, and then you tell me that that's good, that I can't trust that you think something is good, because you don't know what good food tastes like anymore.
I get that. I feel that on a deep soul level.
Right.
I think yeah, I think you kind of also touched on something important there, and that's when I feel this way, and when maybe that doesn't necessarily equal the objective viewpoint, right, of like where that client actually is. And I'm not saying that we need to disregard those feelings and we just need to ignore that and brush it off. I do think that you need to have that discussion of, okay, like, where is this feeling coming from? But I think at the same time too, we have to kind of go, well, you may feel that way, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's your reality, right? And that like may not be where we actually should be looking at. Maybe we do need to look at a different a different way of feeling, or look maybe more at the objective viewpoint of, hey, you know what, we have added in X number of carbs into your diet. We have made certain strength progresses in the gym. You have been able to get away from being scared of going out for dinner with your significant other. And that doesn't mean that we're going to disregard this feeling. You're feeling it for a reason. It's real. But let's also maybe look at some of these other things that we can objectively go, hey, you know what, you may still feel this way, but maybe that doesn't necessarily mean that that's real. And so like, let's now get some introspection and see maybe where that feeling is coming from, and can we start to work through that?
Yeah, I find oftentimes we get caught up on very specific things, and it's like, guess what, what I always get caught up on in terms of my body image? It's the one thing that I don't like. And of course, because it's the one thing I don't like, it's the one thing I can look at the most, go figure. But sometimes, yeah, we absolutely have to bring people like kind of around that. So not to say that, okay, maybe that one thing you don't like is still there, but look at all these other things that have made a ton of really positive progress. And we have to reframe that situation of how we're thinking and perceiving where we're at in that moment in time, to say, hey, you know what? Like, man, work is hard right now. Like, there's a lot of stress, and you know what? I don't love it. And then I'm like, we can take a step back and be like, well, I got that raise last year, or, I remember my last job and the stuff I had to put up with there. And I remember how that would make me feel. And then the fact that I couldn't, have X, Y, or Z that I have now, and all these other things. And I didn't have this. Oh, wow. Well, now I feel a little bit better. Like, I might not feel perfect about it, but I definitely feel better about it, at least. And then the other thing that Christina, I think, boring is the word we use for it. But I think another word for it that really sets it apart is it's convenient. Like, we know how to do the same foods, so it doesn't take us, there's no stress with me cooking the same breakfast every day, because I know what to expect. Like, it makes me feel good because I'm kind of in control. So that's sweet. I like being in control of things. I'm familiar with it. So it's not new. It's not different. It's not scary. I'm not worried about trying to make it work. And like, say, for example, if I'm tracking, guess what? Copy meal from yesterday, paste to today.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't take me any time. And so, like, in a world where we're so mentally stimulated and we have so many things pulling us in all these directions to drain our like mental battery, like, sometimes the answer is what's convenient. Because most of the time when people say, hey, I don't have time for this, right? It's really a convenience thing. Hey, why did I get McDonald's? Well, because it was on the way home and it was quick. So the real thing to figure out there is, well, how do we make the better option more convenient? How do we make the better option at least as close to convenient as that? And so we have figured out these ways for ourselves, whether it be through a bulking phase, be through a cutting phase, to help make things reasonable on a day-to-day basis for this like lifestyle maintenance where I can do X, Y, Z that I want to do. It's because we've figured out how to make things more convenient for ourselves. What works for me as an individual that doesn't take thought, that doesn't take time, and still allows me to prioritize all the other important things. And so maybe, and I'm going to devil's advocate here against how I actually feel, maybe sometimes the bulking and the cutting can help or force us to learn how to make some things more convenient. But in the same breath, oftentimes I find that they overcomplicate and make things more difficult, because you're going through big changes back and forth instead of just figuring out ways to make things go in the right direction a little bit more for us for what we want. That's manageable, that's convenient, that fits our personality, our preferences, our lifestyle, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because that's really the trick. How do we make those small little steps in the right direction with our habits, with our mindsets, the choices we make to put ourselves in a better place where we're more likely to be successful on whatever the goal might be? Well,
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to kind of butt in there, but I was decision fatigue, right? Like, I think that's a very big thing. Like, and especially for, I think, a lot of lifestyle, got families, got big jobs, you got a lot going on. You make a lot of decisions in a day. And, if you're not used to, the lifestyle, let's say, well, guess what's gonna go down the priority list? Well, the food that you choose, like, because you're just sick and tired of making choices all day. And so, yeah, I think convenient, that's a really good word to describe the boring.
And it's funny too, because I think that the busier, this just goes to that I'm weird too. The busier I am, the better I get at controlling variables and making things easier, because I don't have the time for that analysis paralysis, and I just have to decide and move on. And so that's where, like, I think a lot of people get caught up too, is like, then you hear all of these conflicting things about, like, don't eat things out of a package, or don't do this, don't do that. Make sure you have this, but don't have too much of that. And like, there's all this bullshit out there, right? And I think that comes into deciding like, oh, well, now it's that time of year, so I have to start doing this with my body and making these different choices. And I know, like, for me, because life is busy, I have to have things pretty automated where I'm not thinking about it. And then I know to a lot of people that probably makes it seem like, oh, well, then there's not that like enjoyment or something like that. But that makes me really look forward to like the weekends and things there. And so I looked it up. And if you were to do like the 80-20 that people will recommend with stuff where you're, if you're on point, I mean, depending, like I think for a lifestyle, if you're trying to just stay pretty even keeled 80% of the time of being like pretty dialed in, that's going to keep you happy for most of the year, right? That gives you 72 days of the year to not be there. That's 2.5 months, right? Now, I would not recommend you take a 2.5 month vacation from your lifestyle and expect to have things work out pretty easily. Like that might throw a wrench into stuff a little bit. But that does mean that you even have room if you're still making smart choices, but maybe not like adding things up on the weekends. That's a lot of weekends. That's almost every weekend of the year. That's what, 70% of them that you can get away with having both days, like kind of doing what you want. So maybe that's like every Saturday of the year, right? Where you can be in this place and not have to feel constricted by like things. And so, I mean, I think like we've said it, I know I've said it a couple of times, but I feel like a lot of it comes down to that people want the seasons so that they can just define what they have to do for a short period of time before they let their mind focus on something different. And you can build that in and still have things be super smooth and not have to deal with the fluctuations and the ups and downs and I don't like my body here, but I do like it there. And I spend spring liking my body, and then things get kind of out of hand during summer because I'm having a good time. Because that's one thing for me. I'm the opposite of most people. I will not diet through the summer. Like I have zero interest in that. I want to eat on patios. I want appetizers. I definitely want Mexican food. I want the margaritas and the beers that go with it. I have zero interest in trying to stay bikini ready during the summer. And so winter, I could like care less about a lot of the foods that go through there. And so I'm like, well, that's an easy dieting phase for me, right? Whereas I'm talking to a lot of clients now where they're trying to plan out with stuff, because if somebody's going to go into a dieting phase sometime in like the next year, I want to look at their year and be like, well, what do we have going on? Like if the time between like November 1st and January 1st is just your jam and you love baking with your family and you don't want to have to worry about popping a cookie in your mouth and things like that, then we're probably not dieting. And from September on, we're not thinking about that, right? Like maybe afterwards we're ready. And like, you still have to look at like that kind of stuff. Like when we talked at the beginning of the podcast about, where is life right now when it comes to even the very simple things like that? And what does it really line up with? And maybe the seasons then look weird, but that's why it's nice to kind of stay pretty close to where you want to be year round. Because then we don't have to make this 25 to 30 pound change that Tyler was talking about, because that is about what I see, that people are like, oh, it would be nice if I could just lose like 30 pounds in the next 3 months. And I'm like, oh man, that's like a really tight timeline.
I think you know what you're in for.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You don't want to live that life. Like for the most,
it's not gonna be fun.
Right.
Yeah. And like if you're 4'11" and you're trying to lose 30 pounds, it's maybe a little bit different than somebody that's 6'4" trying to lose 30 pounds.
Yeah.
So all over again, your specifics become very important, and what's realistic, what's not, and how we set you up for success. It's not exciting, right? Like if it's simple, if it's convenient, if it's like quote unquote easy, it's not sexy and exciting, which is what most of us like to think of it as. Like, oh, I'm going to make this change. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be fun. I'm going to do these things. But that's high chance for success. If I don't have to think about it a lot and it's easy to manage and it doesn't create a huge demand on what I'm doing right now in terms of change and that kind of stuff, okay, I'd like, of course it's not safe, but that's what does the trick. Maybe the diet phase helps motivate us. Maybe having an end goal can be motivational, sure, but how we approach that, and I think because a lot of us have that experience with seeing a lot of people that have maybe not processed or approached those kind of ideas the best, right? The dirty bulk idea. That's not a great idea. I don't love it. Tell you what. I don't know why I talk like that, but and then the dieting phase, like so many people, like we all see it. We're coaches. Literally, we're kind of pro dieters, right? But at a certain point, if all you do is diet, it's not good for you either. So it's about finding those healthy mediums that are less sexy and more dependable to how we get you there and stay there. Because otherwise, it's the hamster wheel. And although I think other people like might find hamster wheels cute and the hamster, oh, he's getting sexually, he's doing his thing. Like not going anywhere sucks. Like if I'm working, I want to be making progress. I don't want to be stuck in the same spot.
100%. Well, Tyler, you got any closing thoughts for us?
Man, maintenance, even keel, it's the place to be. Like seriously, like I think that's just, it's a great spot to be. Yeah, like we've been saying, maybe it's not sexy, maybe it's not super fun, what you see on social media, but your mental space is going to probably be a bit better in terms of body composition. Your lifestyle is probably going to be a bit better. And at the end of the day, if fat loss is that end goal, you're building a really solid foundation for that fat loss phase of when you do get there. Like you are probably building a little bit of muscle. You are improving your composition still by eating at maintenance, training hard, recovering well, and you're getting to go out every Saturday night with your buddies or your significant other, or whatever that might be, and still enjoy life a little bit. And I think that's something that people just don't think about a whole lot when they come, and go, hey, I want to diet, but I have lunches with clients every day and I like to go out on the weekends. Well, I think we need to have a different discussion there. Right? I don't think that's like, they wonder, how am I going to do this? Well, maybe it's just not time to do it. And that's okay. It's okay to not diet. It's okay to just have a healthy lifestyle, train hard, and enjoy the amazing experiences that life has to offer outside of just dieting. I think that's something really important to consider.
You guys are having amazing experiences?
Yeah, it's nice too to just be in that place. And I think because people really like the idea of the before and after and like the super extreme, like, look what I did in 2 months. It's also pretty cool to kind of just be cruising and then all of a sudden have people start to be like, hey, you look different. Or like literally look in the mirror yourself and just be like, wait a minute, like maybe, still wearing the same clothes, but it's like, those are hanging a bit better than they did before, and have that stuff happen and not, be swinging one way or the other, like through that process, but just put your head down and keep moving forward. And forward progress is forward progress, so it's something to celebrate there, even if it's not as like mind blowing as some of the stuff that you see people do. So cool. Steven, you got anything else? You said feels?
Yeah. Comment if you're listening here. I want to know who you guys think would win in a fight, Big Bird or Snuffleupagus. Let me know. Let me know in the comments below. Not you guys. No, don't influence them. Let it stay open. No preconceptions. Let's.
I'm gonna go ask my husband.
Let them pick. See, see, you can comment when it goes up.
Yes, and then I go in and check the comments. So I'm gonna see, and then I'm gonna pick on you guys for not telling him.
I don't think it's a one-sided one. Yeah, we may be surprised.
I had an immediate response, but then I thought about the opponent and thought, no, I bet he's pretty scrappy. So yeah. I'm curious. All right. Well, with that gem, We will be back very soon. Also comment if you have any ideas of things that you want to hear us chat about a little bit more, because it's always great to know what you guys need from us and what you want to hear us talk about. So thanks for being here, and we'll talk to you soon.